Arsenal set to discover brutal new injury reality this week as Mikel Arteta PSG. Worry confirmed Arsenal news as Crystal Palace clash puts two teams with bigger ambitions together in a game of avoiding injury rather than winning. It is hard to remember too many games inside the final month of a season, which matters so little for either team in the grand scheme of things. On the beach, football is back, and it's come a bit earlier than usual. That exact description does not quite work for Arsenal and Crystal Palace, as both have big goals they still wish to achieve. However, for this one match on Wednesday, it is not the focus. Instead, across 90 minutes at the Emirates Stadium, both Oliver Glasner and Mikel Arteta will be praying for no injuries and just looking to get through it in one piece. Arsenal showed last weekend when they welcomed Brentford to North London just how sleepy things can be when there is nothing at stake. Since early February, right around the time Kai Havertz was ruled out for the season, they have had eyes on the Champions League. Even as Liverpool leave the door slightly ajar at points, Arsenal have been unable to mount a comeback and have instead just plowed on in Europe. For the most part, it has been worthwhile. Nobody has really challenged them properly for second spot, and performances in the Champions League have been brilliant. Whether it is destroying PSV Eindhoven or going up a notch for the visit of Real Madrid, Arsenal have continued to grow. They have done it without key players at different points. Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli have been out. Ricardo Calafiori is available 1 minute and then not for the next. Ben White is in a constant state of flux between getting back to sharpness and then being sidelined again. Then there are Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Magalhaes, both out for the season. Arteta's already small squad has been condensed even more throughout, and competing on multiple fronts has been impossible. Arsenal have still made do and will end this season as runners-up for a third year in a row. The disappointment of not pushing Liverpool further has already been offset by the Champions League success. So yes, a late kickoff 1 week out from having Paris Saint-Germain come to town in the first leg of a semi-final is not a game to get the pulses going. Arsenal have very little to gain and plenty to lose. Even those attending would almost certainly rather be defeated with a weakened team than see another star hobble off injured. Lots of these decisions are judged with hindsight, but Arsenal and Arteta would be completely justified in sending out a second-string Carabao Cup third-round Eoin sort of lineup in order to rest and rotate properly. When asked how he would balance matters, the head coach explained, "We have to somehow put 11 players out there and have 4 or 5 changes, so let's see how they recover in the next few days." The good thing is, they are willing to play because they like the rhythm as well. We are so used to that rhythm every 3 days that the boys are demanding, and then we don't have a game at the weekend, so we have a gap there, so let's see how we get on Wednesday. This is only one half of a game which also involves Palace. They have already been battered 5-1 by Arsenal this season and fell out of the League Cup after going ahead 2. The trip from South to North London isn't too taxing for supporters, but it would be understandable if they didn't massively fancy this. On Saturday, they will instead be going to Wembley to face Aston Villa. Palace got to this stage 3 years ago when they were beaten by Chelsea 2-0. The noise and atmosphere that day said it all for a club seeking a shot at winning a major trophy. The outing to Wembley was considerably bigger for Palace than it was for Chelsea. Having seen Newcastle United end their enormous hoodoo, both Villa and Palace will be keen to book themselves into the final in a match for glory. It is notable that since winning the FA Cup semi-final, Palace have drawn 2 and lost 2 of their 5 matches. The only win came in a grudge match against Brighton, which carries with it the demands of an entire club. No FA Cup excuse can be used here. During this run, though, Palace have drawn to Southampton and conceded 10-2 away games at Newcastle and Manchester City in the space of 4 days. They have had 3 players sent off in the same period. Things have slowed down for Palace, and the build-up is all for Wembley. Just as Arsenal are looking beyond to playing PSG, neither club have much to fight for here. It is a match of inconvenience. Even a win for Palace, which would be savored against a London rival, is not as important as beating Villa. They can only move up to 11th anyway, although Bournemouth and 8th are not too far off. On current form, it is a leap for them to get into the top half though, and the FA Cup is still the priority. Arsenal know that with Thomas Partey missing due to suspension, And there being no room to maneuver in the squad, any new setbacks or injuries could be absolutely detrimental. It is probably best not to expect the strongest X is to be named therefore. Palace went as good as they could against Bournemouth on Saturday, but may well not be in the mood to risk Jean-Philippe Mateta, Ismaila Sarr, Daniel Munoz, Tyreek Mitchell, Eberechi Eze, Mark Guehi, or Adam Wharton on Wednesday. The same goes for Arsenal. Arteta took off most of his key players before the 75th minute mark at Portman Road, but has admitted that changes are afoot. If he had a larger squad, then even more rotation would be in order. It all leaves this game in a weird state. The Premier League, as brutal as it will be for both sides as they want to play for even more, has nothing to offer Arsenal and Palace. Under that backdrop, it would be no surprise to see a game without the big names involved or the normal intensity. Neither manager can admit as much, but this game is a burden and an obstacle in a week that holds much more for Arsenal injury warning hands Mikel Arteta, unavoidable PSG Champions League nightmare. Arsenal news as Mikel Arteta risks injuries with team selection, but has no other option after Bukayo Saka warning. Mikel Arteta eventually rotated his Arsenal team so much that even Raheem Sterling got a game. Nathan Butler-Oyedeji also came on. Both Thomas Partey and Jurrien Timber were left unused. With a delicate balancing act to play in the next 10 days, Arteta chose to stick with the core of his best rescue, including David Raya, William Saliba, Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, and Gabriel Martinelli, as well as Mikel Merino back in midfield. After half an hour of an eventual 4-0 win over Ipswich Town, it had nearly backfired. It is strange to suggest that an 11 which scored twice inside 28 minutes could be wrong in any way. However, that is the way in which Arsenal's next 2 weeks might play out. Already 2-0 up and cruising against a team on the brink of returning straight back to the championship, Leif Davis' tackle on Saka could have changed the course of the final month of Arsenal's season. The challenge, which earned Davis a red card, was everything Arteta hoped to avoid. In trying to keep his players sharp ahead of the upcoming Champions League semi-final first leg against Paris Saint-Germain, Arteta went strong and chose to make changes in the second half, rather than working the other way around. Saka and Merino lasted less than an hour with Rice and Martinelli going off 15 minutes later. Odegaard got a full game, restricted by injuries across his squad, with 3 already ruled out for the remainder of the season, and Kai Havertz looking at an extremely hopeful, optimistic, and doubtful return for the Champions League final if Arsenal get there. Arteta does not have much room for experimenting. Instead, he is essentially forced to risk some players in games that carry little benefit. There are numerous strands to this. On the one hand, Arsenal have extra time to prepare for PSG after their next Premier League match, at home to Crystal Palace, was moved to Wednesday evening due to FA Cup semi-final scheduling. That allows for more rest and recovery. With this in mind, Arteta does not have to worry too much about fatigue with a week to prepare for the first leg in Europe. Given that all focus is on PSG, though, there are debates to be had over whether the main goers should be anywhere near the pitch in the meantime. Had Saka been truly hurt and then an injury concern for PSG, then hindsight would have said that playing him was foolish. Injuries can happen at any time, no matter how many precautions are taken, though. Is it worth living in fear for this week before PSG, or do the minutes in the legs of players help keep them sharp? Which one holds more weight? Saka has gotten up to speed incredibly well since coming back from his hamstring problem. These are all questions that Arteta will have to answer, and has already, it seems, found a stance. We have to somehow put 11 players out there and have 4 or 5 changes, so let's see how they recover in the next few days, he said of the juggling act between Palace, Ipswich, and PSG. The good thing is they are willing to play because they like the rhythm as well. We are so used to that rhythm every 3 days that the boys are demanding, and then we don't have a game at the weekend, so we have a gap there. So let's see how we get on Wednesday. Seeing Saka on the floor at Portman Road, and then replays of Davis's studs racking down onto his ankle, bending it the wrong way, will have been Arteta's worst nightmare. Any niggle, knock, or slight issue between now and PSG is of enhanced jeopardy. That cannot be avoided. Arsenal will need to put out teams with key players in when they face Palace this week, and also Bournemouth ahead of the second leg. Arteta can rotate but does not have much in terms of depth, especially at center back and in midfield. There are always going to be players exposed. When it comes to the untouchables, Saka, Saliba, Odegaard, and Rice, maybe the process will be different. Arsenal must find a way to protect them as much as possible. That is easier said than done, though. It is a tough situation to be in, but one that could make or break the semi-finals. Jamie Carragher now does a U-turn on £27 million Arsenal player versus Ipswich after saying his signing was a mistake. Arsenal used their momentum from beating Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu to punish Ipswich Town as they won 4-0 at Portman Road. There were plenty of positives and negatives to take for Arsenal as they guaranteed that Liverpool would not win the Premier League title on Sunday if they beat Leicester City. Starting with the bad news, Bukayo Saka was walking gingerly after Arsenal defeated Ipswich off the back of Leif Davis' reckless challenge on him that earned the English defender a red card. But the positives were Leandro Trossard, who scored a brilliant brace, and Mikel Merino, who assisted Gabriel Martinelli's goal with a sumptuous back-heeled flick. Jamie Carragher dubbed Merino's signing a mistake earlier this year, but he had a change of heart after watching him impress once again in an Arsenal shirt against Ipswich. Jamie Carragher calls Mikel Merino a revelation after Ipswich Town versus Arsenal. Carragher was full of praise for Merino as Arsenal vanquished Ipswich on Sky Sports. Jamie Carragher pinpointed how Merino has 6 goals and 4 assists in his last 13 games for Arsenal, which shows how much he has progressed since his slow start, as was on display against Ipswich. The Liverpool legend said on Sky Sports, "I just look at Merino, he's been a revelation since he took on that striker role. I know he's deeper in midfield today, but in the last 13 games he has 6 goals and 4 assists." Mikel Merino stats for Arsenal versus Ipswich. The £27.4 million Sky Sports. Man will be proud of himself for continuing to work his socks off and make himself an important player in this Gunners side. Arsenal midfielder Merino has well and truly proven Jamie Carragher wrong, and his stats against Ipswich sum up why that is the case. Mikel Merino stats versus Ipswich Town: assists 1 big chances, created 1 touches, 32 duels, won 10 out of 17, dribbled past 0. In possession, the Spaniard was extremely efficient, managing to touch the ball just 32 times and still managed to register a wonderful assist. But it is off the ball where Merino truly stood out. The former Real Sociedad Dynamo won a staggering 10 out of the 17 duels he contested and was not even dribbled past once. Mikel Arteta predicted Merino to succeed, and his eye for talent deserves credit, as he has become a vital player for Arsenal during the second half of the season especially. Kieran McKenna shares what he thinks of Arsenal as a team after their 4-0 win versus Ipswich. Ipswich Town manager Kieran McKenna will have been aware of Arsenal's quality well before they even arrived at Portman Road. Arsenal had just dispatched Champions League holders Real Madrid over 2 legs prior to returning to Premier League action against Ipswich, a game they knew they needed to win. Mikel Arteta's side failed to beat Brentford in midst of their 2-legged tie against Madrid, and dropping any further Premier League points might have made things uncomfortable. Fortunately for Arsenal, and even though Arteta made a couple of changes, the Gunners were dominant in Suffolk, even before Leif Davis's red card. Mark Clattenburg thought Davis deserved to be sent off for his tackle on Bukayo Saka, a challenge that will have caused a bit of concern for Arsenal fans. Ipswich Town manager Kieran McKenna gives his Arsenal verdict. That being said, McKenna discussed Arsenal's performance when speaking to Sky Sports after full-time. The Ipswich manager described it as a tough afternoon for his side against an opponent that was too strong for the home side, even when it was 11 versus 11. Photo by David Price, Sure Arsenal FC via Getty Images. Praising Arsenal, McKenna said, "It was a tough afternoon. The first half an hour was really difficult. Arsenal played really well, and we were at full stretch to try and compete with them. After the red card and getting to halftime, I thought the group did really well in the second half. The game was almost done, and we had to show the right values, and we did that. They scored 2 goals off short corners. The opponent was too strong for us today when 11 v 11, and with 10 men, it was almost impossible." Leandro Trossard made a statement versus Ipswich. In one of his changes from Arsenal's win in Spain, Arteta decided to start Trossard as his number 9. moving Mikel Merino back into midfield. Thomas Partey will be suspended against Paris Saint-Germain, and it seemed as if Arteta was experimenting with that game in mind to some degree. And after scoring 2 goals against Ipswich, Trossard has surely done his chances of starting against PSG no harm. Interestingly, when speaking to BBC Match of the Day at full time, Arteta did praise the Belgians' versatility, perhaps hinting at a start against PSG. Praising Trossard, Arteta said, "He looked very sharp. We know his quality. Put him right, left or center, and he will deliver." With respect, Ipswich 0-4 Arsenal. Bukayo Saka escapes bad injury after horror tackle and big away win. Bukayo Saka was fortunate to escape a bad injury after a horror tackle from Ipswich defender Leif Davis in Arsenal's win at Portman Road. Davis was shown a straight red card in the first half when he raked his studs down the back of Saka's right ankle with a nasty late challenge. Saka received lengthy treatment, but was able to continue before being taken off 10 minutes into the second half. He had a huge ice pack strapped to his right ankle as he was sat on the bench in the second half, but the fact he avoided serious injury was a major relief for Arsenal ahead of their Champions League semi-final with Paris Saint-Germain. Leandro Trossard scored twice as Arsenal cruised to victory against Ipswich to delay the Liverpool title party. Arsenal went ahead after 14 minutes when Trossard finished well from inside the area. Mikel Merino should have doubled the lead with a header from a corner, but Arsenal did get a second goal on 28 minutes when Gabriel Martinelli tucked home at the back post. Ipswich were reduced to 10 men on 32 minutes when Davis was shown a straight red card for his late challenge on Saka. Saka was fortunate to avoid a bad injury, but the Arsenal man was able to continue after lengthy treatment and missed 3 big chances before halftime.